Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duval, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who, once a year, every year, crank calls the Coast Guard.
Tim Longo. What?
Do you know what you say on that day? You say Mayday, Mayday.
Oh, got it. Wow. Okay, it was right on the tip of my tongue before you revealed it. So well done. Yeah, Mayday. That's my
astute listeners, longtime listeners of the cast will recognize this week as the week of Tim Longo Jr.'s birth.
Yes. I appreciate that. And for the record, as we've probably also talked about on the podcast, but for full disclosure in the public forum, Brett is a better friend than I am because not only did I not send him a present on his birthday, which he did, and I got it today, thank you very much for the book, but I also forgot his birthday, which is in February. So,
good. That's good.
I got the month.
You don't even have the month.
Oh, damn it.
That's good.
Also on the public
We'll give you another chance some other time. There are 11 other guesses you can make.
I did put it on my calendar this year, though, so I wouldn't forget next year. But
yeah, okay. All right. Well, anyway, setting that aside, we had a little bit of a step back last week to go back to discussing the Quest games in the early Sierra days.
Sorry,
you're still laughing over your birthday.
29th, yeah, and
of January,
close to February. Yeah, January 29th. That's what I said. Anyway, yeah, sorry. Good interview last time. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, no, that was really a lot of fun and really interesting. And of course, you're talking to someone in Mark Crowe who has been in the industry a long time, and some of that stuff he's just like, I think this is what happened because it's so long ago, which is a whole thing with game development. It's a young industry, but it's not that young anymore. In a certain sense. And so some of our oldest guard, it's really good to get them interviewed because we get to get some of those stories that, that we'd like to get on tape. I know John Romero does a lot of those sorts of interviews as well. And he likes to get people from the early days and get them on tape and stuff. So I feel like we're doing our little service there, but it was a great conversation.
Yeah. And along those lines, I think the other funny thing, cause I feel like, Mark, maybe Julian was pretty far back. Larry Holland I felt like he brought up some similar stories and Tim and Dave some, but the industry has moved into a place where we do have processes and we do have, we have college, university courses and degrees and it's matured enough to where there's certain questions that we can ask somebody that are kind of all in the same ballpark of like the sort of academic side of what it means to make games, if I may, kind of a generalization, but for Mark, because he was going so far back, I feel like some of the questions we would ask him was like, well, I don't know, we just were figuring it out, because it was so early in those days, and like they were literally like figuring it out. There was no process.
This was his first. This was the first time he'd ever seen a computer. Right,
exactly, and he wasn't coming from a love of games specifically, or from this industry, or even from like necessarily like a close industry, like from application development or something like that. It was just. He happened into this thing and they're just kind of making stuff up. And it's fun to ask those sorts of questions when, we ask the same kind of questions to somebody today and they would, because productions have been we definitely are still learning things and we're reinventing the wheel too much, but there definitely are some themes, right? Common themes that will, and patterns that will emerge. But for him, it was just like, we just were like, we didn't know what we were doing, and it was just kind of refreshing in a way to talk to somebody who wasn't overthinking it,
right.
Back then, like we do on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also, you think about just a half dozen years later or whatever, Tim and Dave are working with puzzle docs and all that. And there's kind of a way to do this. And, back in the early Sierra days, there really just wasn't. There was like, oh, well, let's try to tell a story and put ourselves in the heads of that character and the player and just try. And it's terrific. I mean, and it was such a departure from from the King's Quest game as well, that it really felt very different, despite coming from the same studio. So it's not surprising to hear they hadn't really nailed down what their processes were. It's just, I don't know, it's just funny. It was a good conversation. You can check that one off your life milestone.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he told that story about the photograph, which is just ingrained, burned into my brain, my memory, it was just a total fan fest for me. I just loved it. Then the fact that he found that plate
on the slide. Yeah. And I put, I can't remember if I put that photo in the show notes, but I definitely put the image of Roger Wilco in the show notes. If people want to go back and find that, I managed to track it down, post it to some forum. So lots of funny stuff. But let's set that back aside and return to the game we were playing, that we played a bit of before we took a sidestep or a step back to Mark Crowe, and that's God of War. Which I've lost all my notes at this point. But yeah, it's a late PS2 title, and we had a few topics that we wanted to hit this time that had kind of come up in our last discussion. It wasn't really time to talk about them yet, so let's plunge right in. I mean, I think I want to talk about the camera stuff first, because it is such a huge part of any third person game, period. And we've talked about sort of different ways in that can work. Soul Reaver had sort of a close third person camera. Mario, obviously, in both incarnations has a separate camera looking in on the action. Here it moves around a bit, and it actually reminds me more of Eco in a way, although it's not as good as Eco's, I don't think, but it has different goals, obviously. So let's jump in on that.
Well, I mean, I remember, we've talked about this a lot on the third person games we've played, but it's definitely especially when there's navigation and combat both in the same game, it's definitely a hard nut to crack. And as I think talked quite a bit about in the Mario series, the combination of level design and camera design are also very closely tied, which I think a lot of people don't really realize, because you can really make one look worse than the other and vice versa if you're not careful. And but I remember when this game came out, their full commitment to essentially a fully scripted camera was kind of in this weird, almost retro, bold move that they made at this time, because as we talked about, Shadow of the Colossus came out this year, so there's sort of on this platform. So there's some comparisons that are pretty high caliber stuff, but for game developers at this time, I remember the conversations really revolving around that big choice, because it's such a hard nut to crack. There's a certain side of us at the time where we were saying, that takes out a lot of problems if you just script the camera the whole game. Because you can completely control the view frustum. You can show the player what you want them to see. You can hide things from the player that you don't want them to see. And really it just takes the guesswork out of it, kind of turns it kind of conceptually and theoretically back into almost a 2D game in a way, right? Because that right stick doesn't control your camera. And in fact, in this case, it just is a roll move. And so really from a navigation standpoint, the player just has to worry about the left stick. And
right.
that is,
and that works really well. I mean, you mentioned the sort of the roll move that really works well in an action game, because now the right thumb can be freed up to basically do all the combos and fighting. And it's just a quick flick to hit the stick to roll. You don't have to hold it to do anything with it. So you can just sort of, literally physically speaking, it feels really nice. You can just sort of flick your thumb downward to roll away from an enemy or whatever. And that all works really, really well. I mean, you can take, of course, the scripted camera even further, and just to I don't want to say 2-3 years after this game, and I'd have to look it up, but the Prince of Persia reboot in the next gen, so the early 360, it might even only be 1 or 2 years later, is a game where they script the cameras the whole game, and they go way deeper on that scripting. There's a lot more different types of camera movement, and some very complicated splines. Never really a cut that I can remember. Maybe a cut after you've sort of cleared out an area and you, I don't know, cleanse it of its corruption or whatever the underlying thing was. But I feel like there was a deliberate like pull out or cut to a long distance view so they could do kind of a nice effect. But yeah, if you're going to script the camera the whole way, you can choose what you're going to frame at any given moment, and that mostly works pretty well in this game. And in particular, in fighting sections, it feels like, oh, okay, well, that in a fighting section where they know you're going to have to manage threats from multiple directions and at different distances, and you're going to have to pay attention to all of those things because there's ranged attackers, and then there's sort of their beefy close-in attackers. They can pull that back so that you can see both of those things going on and make your decision about what you're going to do, and maybe try to position yourself so that you're not going to be under fire while you're attacking those bigger enemies or what have you. So I'm thinking of sort of like the squares in Athens and things like that. And I don't think it works as well when they go indoors, to be honest. The sewers of Athens, I guess it's the sewers, where you've got a multi-level thing. It's hard to focus on both of those things at once because there's nowhere for the camera to go, right? There's a ceiling implicitly. And it makes it difficult, I think, to do that really well in all places. But generally, I think it does a pretty good job.
It does. It does. Yeah. And though obviously not the first game to do this, I would assume, and we didn't do the research on sort of like, the first one and some of the sort of Japanese action, third-person action games, the Devil May Cries and those sorts of things, right, are kind of in a similar lineage when it comes to combo-based combat. But when it comes to
not the camera, I don't
know. No, that's what I mean. Yeah, I was going to combine the two because when it comes to the camera, after this game came out, and I think one of the reasons we wanted to play it was you did see some of the copycatting going on. And at least for me, I remember, and this may be kind of my early days at Crystal, maybe it was kind of a conversation was happening, obviously, because it hits close to home with Tomb Raider cameras and stuff about this sort of bold move. They were basically, this camera design was kind of known as the God of War camera, or the God of War approach. And so you saw copycats happening after this because like I said, they were sort of taking that element out of it. The thing that I think I will say, at least speaking for myself, that developers would take for granted is like, well, of course, yeah, okay, let's script the camera, and then we don't have to worry about the camera code and the collision of the camera, whatever. We just have complete control. However, there's other mistakes you can make by going in this direction. The sewers are a good example because to my point earlier about the marriage between level design and camera design, that's, I think, a good one, right? Like you didn't need to design the level that way to take, to make the camera look bad, essentially. And
right. Yeah, I understand the impetus because, I mean, when we were doing Republic Commando, we talked a lot about trying to find ways to, one of the things we felt like was missing from console first-person combat was basically level. Altitude, right? That you were always basically on a plane, even though it was a 3D game. And we wanted to have some way to raise the player's eye or lower the player's eye just for visual interest and challenge as well. And what we found is that's pretty hard to do when you're playing with a stick. Yeah, on a console, and so it tends to actually feel better to do that. But I understand the impetus to try to split the level up that way to put that threatening thing, and it's like, oh well, now I want to stay close to the wall so they don't have an angle on me. But in that tight enclosed space, it's really systems basically bonking up against each other to make that work. And when I played through that on stream, I got up there as quickly as I could because I knew they were there. I had already played through it once, and I'm going to go and get those first, and then I'll come back and get everything down on the ground because they won't chase you. So
Well, then there's two different, obviously, kinds of telegraphing in those cases with a non-scripted camera, and we've talked about this before. Say a Soul Reaver or something like that, they would, you would want to telegraph to the player through maybe shots fired or something like that of the direction of the enemy. So you would know to turn your camera to look up there to see what was there. But in this case, you can't turn your camera, so they'd have to use the camera to actually telegraph your options. And then I believe like the sewers are a good example, because usually the trigger for telegraphing the view that you need, not usually, but sometimes the trigger is in a place where you don't know where it is, right? So to your point, like, okay, they're up there. Probably when you get on the ladder to go up there, then the camera will frame them, but you have to get to the ladder to frame that. Before you do that, you may not have the best view because you can't control the camera. So it's this interesting tension. And I guess maybe as a segue, I'll bring up that sort of related topic that I wanted to mention about.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go into that next.
Yeah, they're closely tied, and then we can hit the other topics. But with Athens, one thing that I was telling Brett in pre-show that I actually forgot about this for this game, because my first playthrough back then, in my memory at least, I had just sort of thought of the game as essentially one long hallway. So it was basically fully linear. But what I had forgotten about is how much side stuff there is, and also in some of the Athens sections specifically, how much sort of backtracking, retread, and sort of circular level design there is, which you would typically do in more of an exploration-based game. But to do that well, you need a control of your camera. And so there'd be times when you wrap back around, and actually many minutes later, you would come back to a place you've been to before in Athens, but maybe come in from above and drop down. I'm thinking of the place where you push the statue over, that one section.
Oh, right, yeah.
That square that you push the statue into, I actually had gone through that multiple times because there's some circular routes. But the thing is because and so my point is that that's kind of exploration-based level design, where you actually you have multiple entrances to one space, and we talked about it with Metroid as well, where you can't get up to one of the entrances, but you come to that entrance later, but from above. So you're like, oh, this is that square that I've been to many times, and I'm kind of coming at it from different approaches. But because of the camera design, you don't really know that that's the case until you discover it. And so there's sort of this weird, they kind of want you to feel like you're exploring Athens and kind of seeing all the nooks and crannies. But they're really, because of the camera design, they're presenting you with what they want you to see. So you would never really know. So there's times when you I feel like you don't really get to enjoy the space and the level design as much. And those two things felt like they had tension to me, at least. Yeah.
Well, the thing about that statue, where that statue falls, is the thing about that is interesting is it works worse there than in, say, that large atrium where you fight all the brutes, and then the woman flees off the balcony in order to get away from you, and you get her key. That's like an atrium with a fountain in the center. The thing that's different about those two things, because I think that latter example actually works a little bit better, is that you actually have now changed the space by kicking that statue down into there. And you may not immediately recognize that, I'm back at the same location. Because now when the camera pans down there, it literally looks different. There's a big statue in the middle of it, right? And if you're not super visual, you may not actually pick up, I've been here before, which is another problem. It's interesting to be changing the environment that way, but they need to be able to tell you that you are. And when you were there before, you didn't have a sense of, I want to get up there.
No, that's what I mean. Yeah. Usually we would, if you had control of your camera, maybe you would light it up there differently, or you would put some enemies up there, or some, maybe some, in the Metroid's case, maybe a power-up or something you might get to eventually, and you think to yourself, how am I going to get up there? But you don't even know that that's a place where you can go or will go, right? And so one side of you might say, well, of course, you don't want them to think they can get up there, so they won't try, and so you kind of want to frame things, but there's other rules and metrics in place to prevent that from happening. But the other side of it is it's just this interesting, it made me think of, and, maybe we get to ask this question, maybe not to a guest, but potentially, was the level design and the camera design being developed at the same time? And so they may not have known, because I feel like as the game goes on, they get better at this. And so the early levels may not have had the luxury of knowing how they were going to crack, you know what I mean? The camera design problem. And so Athens specifically could have been designed without the camera intact, and so they were kind of retrofitting it to some degree. Maybe that's you never know for sure, but it's interesting. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because it was interesting tension that I forgot about. And then the other one that's related that Brett and I both had the same trouble in the specific section, but I actually had it in multiple. The same sort of dissidence applies to sort of forks in the road. Or Y junctions, where you have two options, and because of the scripted camera, because of the way the level design is, you're oftentimes not sure which one to go to first. Probably that there's a critical path gate of some kind, and you need a lock and key, but you basically kind of have to quote unquote explore both of them to figure out which one is the dead end and which one has the key. And there's really no telegraphing on which way to go that I saw, at least. Maybe there was something that I missed, but we mentioned the area around the Zeus, getting the Zeus power.
Right. Yeah. And that is definitely one that literally on stream, I found myself going back and forth. Like, I think I go this way, and I was trying to remember from last time. And of course, the first time I played it, I did the same thing. I wasn't sure which way to go, and I went in and I started climbing up, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel right, and I think I missed something back there, because a big part of the game is trying to find all these different secrets, because there are power-ups, right? So you don't want to miss anything. But there's nothing in the game that aids you to know that you might have missed something. There's no sort of visual indications for secrets, right? So there's no map, for example, where you might look and like there is in Metroid, you might look and say, oh, this area looks like I haven't fully explored it, or there's this little box I didn't see. I should go and investigate that. And because all you have is the camera to get the environment, to sort of make your mental model of what the environment is, you are sort of stuck in those cases, and it's basically on you to pick up on everything and remember areas that you might have wanted to explore, but for whatever reason couldn't tell at that point that you were going to be able to come back or what have you. In that particular case, it's not horrible in the sense that you get blocked in progression if you go to the right first. Eventually, you'll come up to a guy who's up there holding I guess some lever, and won't let you cross on the bridge, and you have to go back down and get Zeus's power in order to be able to kill him. But the player doesn't know that. Yeah,
that's my yeah. I mean, it might not be bad for some players, but I do think that that's classic order of operation challenge, because I don't remember if this happened to me, but I can totally see somebody getting to that guy without Zeus's power and thinking there's something that they have to do locally to solve that.
Yeah, good point.
Because what ended up happening for me, and I did it in the reverse order, so I ended up not finding that guy first, so it actually worked okay for me, but I kind of started going toward him, and then I think I died or something. And so when I started from checkpoint, I was back down, and I was like, to myself, because I was like, well, I'm not trying to 100% it, so I was okay missing some stuff. So in my head, I was like, well, I'm not going to go back and refight those guys. There's probably just some Gorgon eye or something that I'm going to miss. And so I just like, well, forget it. So I went the other direction and kind of thinking, well, that's probably a critical path anyway. So I ended up getting Zeus's thing that way. And then I was like, well, wait, okay, I got this thing. Maybe that other thing I do need to go to, even though there's just some collectibles. And so I kept going, and then I finally found him and I had it, you know what I mean? But if somebody did it in a reverse order, then I don't know. It's just, like you said, there's not as many tools that they have to give you clues like that as other games. Because the map is a good point. And Metroid's a good example for that. And then the other thing that is interesting is that I didn't put in my notes, but I'm thinking of now, there aren't, because of the nature of the camera, it's really good at doing many things because it's scripted, like the sense of scale and the way the framing is really beautiful sometimes, and they really do a great job with it. And I think that's why it stands out as as an important game. However, there's no consistency to rules for the camera because it's completely scripted, right? They're just doing it they're controlling it for creative purposes. And so when it's going to zoom in, when it's going to rotate around, when you trigger the next camera move, there's no way you can predict any of that. So if you think you're kind of need to see around the corner, you just have to trust the game. We actually had this conversation, I think, with Eco as well, right? You have to trust the camera.
You have to trust that the camera knows what you should be able to see, right?
Yeah. And there's just been a few, just enough times in God of War so far, because I am trying to at least find some of the extra stuff where I feel like, I think there's something over there, but there's a little bit of leap of faith, or and usually there ends up rewarding me for taking that leap of faith. But and they're obviously that's their version of hiding secrets, so it's like they're using the camera to do that. But I don't know. It's just a little nerve-wracking sometimes, maybe because I'm just OCD and I want to have more control. But takes a lot of trust.
I will say, and maybe we'll segue into the over-the-top kind of nature of the game. But one of the things I do appreciate that you pointed out, and I'm glad you mentioned it, is the sense of scale. When you go into Pandora's Labyrinth, it's not some tiny little hedge maze, right? It's these enormous walls and there's this giant rolling thing with spikes in it that's chasing you around. I mean, there's just the scale is enormous. And of course, you're kicking over statues. You see Ares off in the distance, and he's immense. Mm-hmm. You walk into that statue of, I guess it must be Athena, right, with the sword.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably Athena. Yeah.
And you walk into that. I mean, that's enormous. I mean, just everything is just gigantic. Oh, yeah. And then, of course, you climb up on Kronos in the desert.
Kronos, yeah. I mean, that Kronos moment was, that was just everyone was talking about that thing when that came out.
I'm going to climb around on that. Like, that's amazing. Yeah. And they definitely. I mean, that's always been, I think, a strength of the series is playing with the sense of scale. And one of the things I guess I'm really curious about, and I hope we'll get a chance to talk about it, is with the new game. I know that the camera has changed dramatically. It's a much closer third person. I haven't played any of it yet, but I've heard early reports and reviews. And I'm really curious about how all of that translates, because I know they're going to capture that same sort of sense of scale and scope and immensity of I'm just this tiny little human in a world of giants and gods and titans and whatnot. And I think that could be really, really interesting, and it's a compelling challenge. I'm really interested to see how they tackled it. We'll put that off to the future, but that does kind of tie into sort of talking about the sort of over the top nature of this game, which I think is more off-putting to me now than it was at the time, because the violence is so extreme. But I still get a chuckle out of it. I can't lie.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. One of the things I can definitely appreciate about it, and I think I mentioned this up top in the first episode, that it's not my favorite franchise and game because of some of its tone. But the thing that I really can appreciate about it, though, is that they do have they have a cohesiveness between those aspects. So one is the way they use camera and scale, combined with the QTEs, combined with the sort of celebration, I guess I would say, of animation and custom, paired animations where two characters are interacting together. And then the combination of all those things, and then they throw the gore in there, of course, too. But taking a Minotaur down, for instance, right? There's a lot of different things happening there that are very seamless and cohesively put together that we take for granted when we're playing it, because you have to fight a Minotaur with the basic combat, and then you trigger the QTE opportunity, and then the camera, once you hit that, the camera shifts, and then they pair the two characters, and then the animations, are super over the top and fun, and just like, and you get this, and then you have the little mini game with the tapping of the button, and then you get this great payoff of just ripping that thing apart, so then they do that multiple times throughout the game, right? And then sometimes on a grand scale as well, like with the with the Hydra in the beginning or something, right? Where you just get like that writ large. And so I don't know. It's just they definitely had their stuff together when it comes to putting all those things together in one nice package. And the big
and they're also giving you sort of control over the animation in a lot of places. When you mentioned the Hydra, for example, it's I'm playing this animation, but I'm playing it at the speed at which I can mash the button, or what have you, and that is great. And they actually take it that little bit further, where it feels, it's funny. It almost feels herky jerky, like a stop motion animation would. And of course, my first introduction to any of these myths was through the Ray Harryhausen work, in the Argonauts or Sinbad and the Seven Seas or what have you. And it's kind of similar, right? It sort of has that same sort of feel. I mean, he's way more brawny, obviously, and kind of definitely a different sort of character than you see in those heroes and those old movies. But some of those big moments have that same sort of quality. And I think that's what connects with me more than anything else, is that those are some of the oldest movies I can remember seeing in my youth, because they were on TV all the time on Saturday afternoons. And so I've seen the animating skeletons and Jason and the Argonauts pop up a billion times. Like, I mean, I've that's etched into my brain, and I love that stuff. I'm a huge fan of that, and I mean, the part of those things. Part of what makes those movies work is the fact that they are not quite natural, right? Like I said, they're herky jerky and it feels a little strange, but they should feel strange. They're way bigger than we are, or they're skeletal, or they're what have you. And I think the same sorts of things that work here are those same sorts of things. Like, this thing's enormous. It's really hard to pull it down onto a spike and make it roar itself or whatever. Yeah. Or I'm fighting this Minotaur, and it's a real struggle to push my, blades back through the back of its throat, which is, pretty nasty, but it works. And you get that same sort of herky jerky, unnatural motion, because they could have just made that smooth. They could have just, as long as you were pushing the button, it just proceeds at some standard rate, instead of I'm literally going to advance it a certain amount and even have it drag back a little bit as you push the button. So I appreciate those things. I mean, I'm a little less taken by the sort of the gore and stuff. I mean, one thing we should probably talk about, I don't know, did you get to the point where you had to sacrifice a guy?
Sacrifice a guy, maybe
you have
not.
To take a guy in a cage. It's
I remember that from the first time. No, I haven't gotten there. Yeah.
All right, so you've got a bit to catch up on still, because the challenges of the labyrinth take a while.
I remember. I haven't done those yet.
But there's this section where and this is where it really kind of pushes what a monster he is. You take this prisoner who's in a cage, and you have to push him up a hill, and he sort of will slide back and rest on different things sticking out. And you have to fight your way all the way up, and you push him all the way up there, and you put him in a place where he's going to be incinerated. So you're literally going to do a human sacrifice to open a door. He is the key. But it's a fiery lock that he unturns, I guess. It's pretty, and he's screaming the whole time, like, don't do this. You don't have to do this. And it's a tough moment. They're totally committed to it, but it is a tough moment from that standpoint.
I mean, I feel like at the time, for better or for worse, there was a sort of, I guess it's a little bit like Doom in a way. There's a sort of novelty to how far they went with it, and that full commitment to it. And we don't have to dwell on it too long, but there's the sort of toxic masculinity that's in this game too. And actually, I read just this morning that Cory Barlog is kind of speaking out about some of the stuff about the franchise and how they're trying to evolve with a new one and stuff. So they're definitely self-aware of that problem, but there's just he's not a good dude, and playing that anti-hero kind of character, that does it for people. That's something that people like to let off steam with, I guess. So
right, I mean, it's all over. Yeah, it's all over pop culture. I mean, it's not new.
No, not at all.
Certainly at this time, the Sopranos would have ended like a year or two before this, right? I mean, he's not a good guy.
Breaking Bad. I mean, there's
I was gonna say Breaking Bad was probably starting a little bit after this.
But yeah, Breaking definitely in.
Yeah, they've definitely have been in for the last 20 years, right? I mean, that's not that's a whole streak in our culture, and it's funny because I so often play video games to be the good guy. I play an RPG. I'm the goody two shoes. I always play the paladin, basically, in terms of my choices. Honestly, as a class, obviously, I'm a bard. We know that.
Yeah, we're well aware of that. Yeah,
we'll hear some of my singing later, but
no, are you serious?
Oh yeah, but no. When I play RPGs, I like to play the good guy. I like to play the hero when I play games, and be unambiguously the hero. It's a pleasure. It's an escape, right, from my evil life.
Where you're the villain?
Where I'm the villain, the villain.
Nice.
And here's a game that just there are no choices to make you a good guy. You may come to understand Kratos, and we'll probably talk about that next time, and where all his rage comes from. But fundamentally, you're not doing nice things, and they're making you do not nice things. So
yeah, there's no choice in the matter. Yeah, you're definitely playing this character. Yeah. So there's and I appreciate the commitment to that too, for sure. Did you want to talk about the RPG thing at all, or hit that one real quick?
Let's get into it a little bit, because it's actually just a little bit thinner than I even thought. There's sort of the opportunity. I mean, it ties in nicely, I guess, with the combo system, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that pre-show, but we should hit that a little bit too. I mean,
So as you execute more and more combos, you get more bonuses to how many red orbs basically enemies are going to drop as you rip them apart. So as you chain together attacks against multiple enemies, and this of course was of course motivated by the level design, the enemy design, to have hordes of enemies coming in over time that you can be constantly fighting against, and having that quick flick dodge to be able to keep these strings of attacks going, so you can get that count up pretty high. I got mine quite high at one point. I want to say like 70.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And you get to, at that point, you get multiple bonuses for your red orbs, which you can then spend on improving your various attacks effectively. I'm kind of curious what your approach is with those, in terms of what you spend on.
Yeah, I actually intentionally made a little bit of a plan this time, because this is only the second time I played this game, to be honest. And so I leveled up the main blades, I think to level 3, maybe as much as pretty quickly. But then I actually banked all of them because I wanted to actually level up the Artemis's blade,
the big heavy blade, right?
Big heavy one, because I didn't play with that the first time I played the game.
Yeah,
I didn't play it at all, so I wanted to actually see what that thing was all about. So I banked all of my red orbs since then, and as soon as I got that blade, which was recent for me, I put everything I had into it, and so it actually takes a lot to level that thing up because I think it's a balancing thing for them, and so but it ups its damage essentially and its effectiveness, and man, I'm just like slicing dudes with that thing.
Yeah, you can mow through things pretty well with that. I mean, and that of course is itself a balancing thing, because of course then your combo meter doesn't go as high.
Yeah, and also you don't have range, right? That's my main worry, is that how am I going to feel without having that range? So I'm going to commit to that plan and see how it goes. But yeah, that's my plan. Well, what have you been doing?
I've actually I have leveled that thing up at once, I guess, the Blade of Artemis, and I've put a lot into the main 2 blades. I forget what those are called, but I have been enjoying that. I tend to do that. It's a thing I have with games, that I like to take whatever the base weapon is and take it as far as I possibly can. It's always been a thing. Like I played the first Dead Space and only used the cutter.
Oh wow. Nice.
Yeah, I think there's an achievement for that. So,
Hmm.
but I like that. Like, I really enjoy like how far can I go in Bioshock with just the wrench or
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
And it's just a thing that I'm always curious about, like how well balanced is this? And sometimes it gets you into trouble, right? You haven't spent any time in the other things. It's like, oh, I really need to know how to use those now, and I haven't used them at all, and the tutorial is way gone, and I don't remember how to actually use the weapon.
Right.
But for the most part, it works pretty well. Like I did everything with the bow in Tomb Raider as well,
Mm-hmm.
because it was the first the reboot that you worked on.
Mm-hmm.
For the same reason, it's like, oh, this is the iconic thing for the character. I want to invest in that as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I tend to do. This time I am trying to branch out because I'm sure that I did this last time, and I do want to at least see the other stuff a little bit more.
Investing in the powers seems weird to me. Like, have you done any investment into the specific?
I have. I put some into the what is it? The Rage of Poseidon or whatever, which is the area attack.
Yeah, that one might be useful. Yeah, because of the area attack part. I don't know.
Right. So you
like
get a lot of people around you. Actually, the time that I got the biggest multiplier was I had a ton of people around me, and once it's a couple levels in, you can be like mashing the circle button as it does its attack, and you're basically doing additional damage. So you've got 8 people around you, and you're just hammering that button, and the number is just climbing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maybe they make it worth it then, because those red orbs are so valuable. Especially, leveling up that Blade of Artemis takes a lot. So
it does. Yeah.
I don't know how many levels I'll get into it, but yeah. And the other thing that I think we probably should talk about a little bit is, I think they're called the Chaos Blades of Chaos. Is that what the two? Mm-hmm. Is that what they're called?
Yes,
but anyway,
yep, you're right.
I do think that I'm trying to think of maybe a Devil May Cry or another game that did something similar, but I feel like there's
Rygar.
a bit of Oh yeah, Rygar. That's probably their influence. Yeah, good catch. I just feel like there was a bit of an innovation.
Somebody tweeted that at me, but that's definitely. I played. I actually have played Rygar all the way through, and Rygar is more like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta or whatever, with the sort of fixed camera in a scene, fight the boss, move on, and less sort of continuous movement through the space, or it doesn't feel as continuous because of the sort of disjointed camera, almost Resident Evil style, but with a more action.
More arena based kind of, right?
Right. A little bit, yeah.
Well, anyway, I just thought the Blades of Chaos were kind of a nice small innovation when it comes to having these cool blades that seem like, kind of badass daggers, or dual wielding daggers, but then they had the chains, and so you got the range. You know what I mean? If they hadn't been chain based, I think the game would have been less successful and felt a lot different, because there's this kind of concept that he has these these things that are attached to him and can fling all around in all these different directions, and it just felt like something I hadn't seen before in a game like this, I guess other than Rygar, but versus like the sword you get at the end, later, or a katana, or some of the other sort of more obvious things. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting. I'm also
definitely. It is a weird thing, because you get this sort of benefit of ranged attacks, but you can also do a lot of things that seem really visually interesting. You can, like he does, you can pound them against the ground, but at distance and things like that. It's a compelling design, because of the flexibility and the different ways that the animators can go to town on, we can make him use his whole body to fling this thing out a long distance and reel something in maybe and swing it around his head and just do all this kind of interesting stuff, because it's attached to him and it effectively becomes an extension of his arms. It's like, if you got a chance to play Plasticman or Mr. Fantastic. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a little, and my last little anecdote there is I just realized that I've never really been good at combo based games. I don't know what it is, but I think that's why I'm not great at fighting games.
Oh.
Yeah,
I mean, part of it is I can't, in the moment, I have difficulty remembering the combos, and so I tend to lean on the same ones again and again and again, and those are probably not the things you're supposed to use. I mean, I didn't make it through Bayonetta as a perfect example. I was really enjoying it, but I just was not really capable. Similarly, I didn't get through Ninja Gaiden Black. That's.
I think it's just certain players are good at those sorts of things, and I don't even think it's an age thing for me. I think I've just never been good at them.
I think you beat your head against it, and eventually you get there. I mean, I have been able to do skill-based challenges in games, but that is one thing that, I think in the moment I really just need a cheat sheet in front of me that I can pause and refer to at any point, because I tend to forget things, and I suppose it's probably possible to pause the game and go find that stuff in the menu somewhere.
Oh no, they're there. Yeah. No, they're there. If you go to the RPG screen and you L button, L1, R1 back and forth, I think you can, whatever you're selected, it'll tell you what the combos are.
Oh, okay.
So I studied up a little bit, but because of my memory as well, it's like I don't want to be keep going back and forth into the menu. It kind of breaks the flow. So I just find the ones I like. Yeah. So I wish, like watching somebody play those sorts of games, and I think this is no exception. I feel like back in the day, I watched somebody, or maybe I watched a YouTube video of someone playing on the hardest difficulty who was really good at the game using the combos. And it's like anything. It's like watching somebody good at a fighting game. It's really a splendor to watch. Yeah. I'm just not. It's not that good.
Yeah, no, I'm glad the games are out. Games like this are out there, and that there are people who go and devote so much time to that because they are fun to watch. But I am never going to be that guy.
No.
And I am getting to the point, I think, where actually I am having some. And it is accentuated on the stream because I've got like this lag in the audio, where I really have to pay attention to what's on the screen and not what I'm hearing, because there's a couple seconds lag due to the recording.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah, because I'm basically listening on my PC so that they don't have to hear my TV through the mic. So it is a little weird. There's also just that weird disconnect of like I have to play what I'm seeing and not what I'm hearing. More than anything else. It's even harder. Yeah, it does make it a little challenging. And I'm playing on the normal difficulty. I think you were playing on easy.
Yeah. Even though I'm playing on easy, the last little note I wanted to mention so far that I do want to give them major kudos on, because it's really hard to get right. I feel like the escalation of power and the enemy tuning and escalation of enemy, introductions is quite good. Like I feel... And yes, I'm playing on easy, so maybe I'm getting, obviously a warp perspective, but I just feel like as I'm leveling up and the amounts of orbs and stuff that I'm getting and devoting and then what enemies I'm getting when, it's been very smooth for me. The tuning aspect of things is really an unsung hero. Those designers are unsung heroes of game development, because it's all numbers. It's all just this behind the scenes stuff that nobody ever knows is going right. But when it goes wrong, you really know. And
you really feel it. Yeah.
Really kudos to that.
And one thing I really like, and this happens a lot, is they'll introduce some new enemy and you're like, oh man, this thing's really difficult. And then they'll throw another one at you, or maybe you'll defeat one, and it's like, oh, you liked having that one? Here, have two. And you feel like you're really pushing yourself to the very limits. And I don't know if I'm not going to suggest that they're cheating the numbers or anything like that, but I could also believe that they were like that. There's no reason not to be like, oh, we're going to give you two. They're going to do half as much damage. You won't notice that because you're so frenzied over fighting two of them. But you'll feel like a total and complete, killer when you're doing it. Again, I'm not suggesting that they do that, but it's a thing I could imagine doing. I mean, maybe not knocking it down that much, but definitely, or trying to construct the AI in such a way that it's natural. There's a rhythm that develops between fighting one and then flipping over to the other one because one's kind of stumbling or what have you. And I feel like those are all things that they do pretty well. Cool. Well, all right. Let's call it there, because you're going to have a lot to play next week. And so I'm sure some more stuff will come up from that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we have a lot of stuff that we're still yet to see, like a number of powers and all that stuff that we haven't encountered yet. And of course, big story stuff. And maybe we'll tackle sort of the big overarching story. We kind of talked about the tenor and tone of it last week or 2 weeks ago, but maybe some more specifics next time.
Yeah, they're starting to pepper some things in, about Ares and some stuff that you don't really know what Kratos is talking about yet. But it's also a little nice touch near the sword, whether that's Artemis or Athena. Did you walk up to the ledge, up the stairs?
To the right?
To the well, the sword, the statue's right, but there's the stairs that zigzag up to the left of those. Yeah. So you go up to the ledge, basically.
Right, where he jumps off or whatever.
Yeah. So there's this nice little foreshadowing because you see, obviously we've seen the opening of the game, and then you can visit that spot, and then there's a little text message that comes up about sort of the way that you don't know why, but the way that there's kind of this ominous feeling to it. So that was a nice little touch, I thought.
Yep, that's a pretty cool spot, and they do a lot of that. There's a lot of circularity in this game, and that's one of the opportunities for it. So yeah, a lot of interesting things. All right, well, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and just do a one review and one email.
Okay.
Welcome back from the break. We like to do our sort of feedback segment where we read reviews and or emails that have come in. You can, of course, review us on Apple Podcasts. It's a huge help for us to find new listeners, or so I'm told by literally every other podcast I listen to. So, I'm going on all that expertise. But we also love to have your emails at devgameclub@gmail.com. So if you could shoot us thoughts and reviews, we would appreciate them. This first review I'm going to do because I sort of want to test and see if Tim can recognize it, both from my whiskey fueled impression, or maybe some of the words in it. This is one of those unusual off the wall reviews that we get from time to time that I deeply appreciate. So Boy.Pockets out there, whose review is titled, "This is a top quality podcast." This is for you. This is a top quality podcast. It has quickly become my favorite podcast. It is insightful, interesting, and funny. It's a friend and it's a companion. And it's the only podcast you will ever need. It never needs ironing. It takes weights off hips, bust, thighs, chin, midriff, and it finds you a job. It is a job. Never stops, lasts a lifetime, mows your lawn. It picks up the kids from school. It gets rid of unwanted facial hair. It gets rid of embarrassing age spots. It delivers a pizza and it lengthens and it strengthens. And it finds that slipper that's been at large under the chaise lounge for several weeks. And it plays a mean rhythm master. It makes excuses for unwanted lipstick on your collar. And it's only $1. Step right up. It's only $1. Step right up. It's new, it's improved, it's old-fashioned. It takes care of business, never needs winding. It disinfects, it sanitizes for your protection. It's a redeemable coupon, no obligation, no salesman will ever visit your home. Read the easy-to-follow assembly instructions, batteries not included. Send before midnight tomorrow, terms available. Step right up, step right up, step right up. There you go, sir.
Oh my God. Are you?
I went for it.
You totally went for it. I don't, but I'm afraid.
You have no idea.
No, I mean, I was thinking of Tom Waits for some reason.
Oh, ding, 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 ding.
Is it?
Yep.
Is that one of his songs, though?
It's a song from it's sort of a B-sides album.
Yeah, I don't know if I've heard the song, but it felt like something. The voice was great, by the way. Good work. Well done. And it felt like a lyrics he could write. So I don't know if I've heard that one, though. I know Tom Waits pretty well, but yeah, if it's a B-side, maybe not. So, Jesus, I cannot believe that just happened. Who was the reviewer? Who was
his name was Boy.Pockets.
Oh, it's definitely his real name.
Yeah, totally. Obviously,
the grandson of
New Jersey Pockets. I'll play a little bit on the way out. This is from an album called Used Songs from 1973 to 1980. So it is kind of a B-side collection, I think.
Yeah, I probably have heard it. I just forgot. Yeah, it's a long time. Yeah. But, oh man, whew, that's gonna be a famous moment in our podcast.
I have to say, I feel pretty good about you identifying it as Tom Waits.
Yeah. Also the whiskey fueled was a critical element of that.
Had to add a little rasp, and now I need to rest my throat for several weeks.
Imagine how he feels, poor Tom Waits. Good actor too, though. He's got it where it counts.
Or he had it, right? Is he no longer with us? I don't know.
I didn't. Maybe. I didn't think so though, but perhaps.
Oh, okay. No, I'm probably wrong. No, he's still with us. Sorry.
Okay. Good. Too early.
Yeah. Hopefully he listens to the cast. Tom, call me. Back you up. Back you up on the next tour.
The irony.
Other whiskey fueled voices.
As the you could be the opener for him. That's some irony for people who listen to the longtime listeners of the cast know that my daughter's obsessed with Gilmore Girls, and I think eventually we convinced Brett to watch it. But the only reason that she knows who Tom Waits is because they played one of his songs once in one of the episodes.
Of course,
he was singing Tom Waits, a couple months ago or whatever and I was like, hey.
From her 8th time watching the series.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely literally on their 8th full watch through. But I was like, hey, what you like Tom Waits? And it's like, I don't know who that is, but the song's from Gilmore Girls. I was like, oh, jeez.
There we go.
Great. Yeah.
There it is. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
53rd minute or whatever.
Didn't mean that one. Yeah. Well, snuck it in. That one's for you.
All right. Let's turn to email. Yeah, let's go ahead and hit that one. And you read for a while so my voice can recover.
Yes, we'll do. Okay, subject: explicit versus implicit tutorialization from Zachary Crownover. Crownover, is that the right?
Crownover, I think.
Crownover. That's got to be his real name. Hi, Brett.
Crownover.
Crownover. I feel like Chevy Chase. Okay. I've been dabbling in independent game development for about 3 years now, but just recently quit my day job as a software developer to focus on game development full time, and am now rapidly approaching the expected release date of my first commercial product. Of all the anticipated hiccups and growing pains one can reasonably expect from entering into a new field, those associated with crafting an effective tutorial were not ones that I foresaw. But here we are. In your most recent episode, you discussed the inclusion of both explicit and implicit tutorialization elements in God of War, and seemed to lament the inclusion of the former. While I'm of a similar mindset much of the time, I'm wondering if you all think there are particular circumstances in which explicit tutorialization is warranted or even encouraged. As I write this, I'm thinking specifically of titles like SpaceChem or FTL, in which the core gameplay is complex or foreign enough that the target audience will likely not possess the requisite vocabulary to meaningfully engage with it unless they're very deliberately instructed. My title, though small in scope, is similar insofar as there are few skills a player could bring from previously played games and directly applied to mine. Thanks so much for hearing me out, and please keep doing what you do. Zachary Crownover. P.S. If Brett's still looking for horror-themed adventure games to play, Detention by Red Candle Games is a mighty fine one equipped with an affecting narrative and haunting imagery. Interesting.
Appreciate that. I actually, I also wanted to call out, and now I'm going to have to look it up. I think it's called The Last Door, seasons 1 and 2, which are adventure games that it didn't occur to me at the time. Yeah, they're called The Last Door, by I think a Spanish company, sort of Victorian and somewhat, I would say, Cthulhu-esque horror, sort of low res, pixel art type stuff. Pretty good. So that was a horror game an adventure game that didn't occur to me when we were talking adventure games a while back. Anyway, let's turn to Zachary's question about tutorialization. So when you're looking at games that are more simulation-y, like SpaceChem or FTL, I think the better thing you can aim for is clarity of user interface and the user experience. Because there are so many different knobs and dials to turn and buttons to push, etc. When you look at FTL, it's like there's a lot you can do with that ship to deal with the problems that you have, and there's a lot of ways to tackle that. And I think the best you can do is to be really clear in explaining what the effects of different actions will be. Because the action is generally in a game like that is basically click. That's basically the action, right? And I think that implicit tutorialization works a lot better in games where there are a number of verbs that are highly action-based and maybe are clear from one context, and you want to sort of push the player in that direction in another context. And that's kind of my off the top thinking about that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. I was going to say simulation and highly systemic games where the systems are complex enough to where the interactions that they're going to have with each other need some explanation so you understand the cause and effect. I think the reason that we lamented the God of War example is they're really... it's easy for me to say because, like I said, I think in last God of War episode that I fail at this all the time and am as guilty as the next person at explicit tutorialization. Case in point, Republic Commando. And so I definitely know why and how developers can make that error. But God of War theoretically doesn't need explicit. Like you could level design your way through implicit tutorialization and boss design and enemy design quite well, I think, in that game. I mean, I'll let them have the call outs of button prompts on top of heads of enemies and stuff. Like that would be okay, but there's ways. And I think Nintendo does it the best. Nintendo's case in point. So I think mechanically, like Brett said, mechanically rich games where there's interactions with those minimalistic systems, whether it be physics or something. But yeah, simulation-based games like a Civ or those sorts of things need some. So, and I think it really depends on the genre and the goals of the game, because I think also if maybe exploration is an important, like I think of maybe Minecraft as an example, right? Where that game is very much about discovery and the exploration of it. And part of its sort of identity is not knowing how things work, so you explicitly don't, well, sorry, no pun intended, don't want to tell the player too much because you want them to discover. And so if that's part of the game, then, the identity of the game, then you want to shy away from it if you can. And the other thing with the God of War example or Republic Commando example or whatever is that I think often it's production based and scheduling based and time based and pressure and stress. And so we kind of take the easy way out and a bit. I wouldn't call it lazy design, but I think it's just kind of survival where it's like, well, let's just do this and get the information to them. And,
I mean, to be fair, it's really difficult to do.
It is. No, that's
tutorialization. I mean, that's what, I mean, the thing is that it pays off so well because the player has that moment of understanding that, I do this and this will happen. And it's something they've done without being told to do it. Because whenever somebody tells you to do a thing and you just like, oh, press this button, it's like, oh, I'll just press that button, and
you're not learning it. You're not learning it. Yeah, that's why implicit
when you discover it. Right? Yeah, when you discover it through sort of implicit tutorialization, it's so great because I did this thing, and you make that connection between I did a thing and I had this result, and wasn't that cool? And that's what we lament more than anything else is when opportunities for that aren't taken.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in a really system-rich game where you've got a ton of variables, it's really good to have things that are going to indicate to a player before they do an action what the effects of that action will be. Oh, I'm going to click this button that's going to close a door. I mean, it should say closes door and cuts off oxygen, to that room, or oxygen being sucked out or whatever in the case of FTL. I haven't played SpaceChem, but I know that that's a super complicated game as well. Yeah, I mean, I think you just need to present that information so that and particularly in these sorts of games, well, FTL is not a good example. I was thinking maybe, if there are games in which you can basically pause and look at all your options, consider all your options. Civ is a great example for that, where it's like, I can look at all the things I'm going to do.
Turn-based.
And right. Yeah, because I'm going to be taking this turn and taking a number of actions, I can actually evaluate all those sorts of things. And that's a very different sort of thing than a real-time action game. Which I think is really more what we were talking about in terms of tutorialization. Because any game in which you have the time to examine your environment closely, whether that's a lot, the representation of a spaceship or the chemicals, I think, that you fit together in SpaceChem, or any other sort of simulation game, Civ, etc., you have the time. I mean, that's true in VATS and Fallout. You have the time to go, oh, okay, this is my percent chance. So how much ammo do I have left of that? Oh, I've only got 2 shots. Maybe I should take the better shot, right? The higher percent shot, even though I'd rather shoot the guy in the head, right? I mean, you can make those decisions and you have time to do it because the game is effectively paused.
Yeah. I mean, implicit takes a lot of iteration, and a lot of, and I think that's why probably Nintendo
and player feedback.
Player feedback, usability, testing, and etc. But I think Zachary made a good point as well. That the final point I'll make is, I think there's a big element of trying to really know your audience as much as possible too, or at least your core audience.
Yeah, good point.
That will help influence or impact how you're going to tutorialize it. And in God of War's case, they're assuming they're going to get action gamers, so there's certain vocabulary and maybe verbs that they might be already used to. So try to not handhold them. Right. Shooters are another example, right? Like a lot of shooter games are assuming that shooter players are going to come to it, and they're not necessarily trying to get somebody who's never played a shooter before to play. So you're there's certain things you can. So depending on what your game is, Zachary, you might think about who you want it to go to, and think about what because he made the point, like, players aren't going to be coming to his game with the certain skills that he will want them to. And so if he knows that, then he may already know his audience well. So.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess my final caution will be, as much as I like to have the availability of all the information on screen, presenting it in as terse and visual a manner as possible is also the way to go, because as we've said before, players don't read.
No, especially this day and age.
Yeah, when I say tooltips, what I'm thinking is more like iconography rather than text. Like, oh, this is going to give plus to this and minus to that, and maybe those are color coded, so that it's really clear. Like, oh, this is going to improve my engineering, but my aggressiveness is going to suffer or whatever. And those are hopefully icons as well, like a fist versus a crossed wrenches or whatever. Yes, I mean, so those are sorts of considerations as well. You really need to know your market on stuff like this.
Good question, though.
Yeah, no, it's a terrific question, especially since it's something we talked about. But also, I thank you for the horror-themed adventure game recommendation, because I may go check that out.
I'm going to look up Zachary Crownover and see what he's working on. Maybe we can figure out his game.
Yeah, that would be cool. Anyway, Zachary sent, of course, his email to devgameclub at gmail.com, as we talked about before. Thanks, Zach, for your email. If I may call you Zach, if that is your real name. And yeah, I guess that's it for this week. First of all, I want to wish you a happy birthday again, sir. And
Thank you.
And for your birthday, what I'm going to give to you is the opportunity to play the rest of God of War before our next show.
Yes, I will not be playing it on my birthday, but yes, we're going to finish it off. Yep, I know I have a long road ahead.
You do. Yes. You have the road out of Athens and into the desert, and then although you've already
I'm not.
You're in the Pandora area, right?
Yeah, I'm in the rings of Pandora right now. So.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, so you have started kind of doing this challenges, but yeah, and then we'll talk about sort of the end of the game. I think we'll talk about the big story beats because I do think that the tragedy stuff kind of works. It's also not great because of how violent it is. We'll talk about all that stuff then.
Definitely. Yeah, there's been some scenes because he's had some flashbacks and stuff already that we've seen with his wife and stuff that have been pretty ham-fisted in their delivery. So yeah, we need to talk about that. But they're going for the Greek tragedy thing, I assume. But that's not easy. So.
No, that's certainly not. All right. Well, for now, I guess I'll say step right up, step right up, step right up, and good night.
Good night.
Don't be caught with the drawers down. Don't be caught with the drawers. Step right up.